Just a quick warning, if you're watching this video, there will be spoilers for this questline and dungeon. If you want to see game design, then keep watching, but if you actually want to play it, then go get it. Hello. In this video, I'm going to briefly cover how I tackled creating a dungeon for a Skyrim mod. The mod currently features a custom NPC with voice acting and a quest that introduces the dungeon. When I first approached the dungeon, I developed a backstory, something that helps to inform me how the dungeon should be built. I decided to go with a cave system and a mine because later quests in the chain would lead us deeper into the mountains of the rift. I first drew a map of what I wanted the nodes and paths to look like. Then I planned out a critical path and alternate paths, as seen in the image. In the beginning of the dungeon, I give the player some warning. Bandits are definitely here, marked by the skulls on spikes. The player is forced down a narrow entrance that breaks out into an open room. With subtle hints of lighting, I try to provide alternate routes. In general, players will focus on the fire and the enemies, but those who wish to avoid conflict have an alternate path to the right. In this case, we confront the bandits and defeat them. In this area, the player can find a note discussing the locked door, but they can also find a bow and arrows placed nearby, both acting as hints to solving the puzzle in front of them. The door is locked, and looking inside, the player can see tripwires. Attempting to activate these by hand does not work, so an alternate form of activating them is required. We find a dead body inside and bloody bandages. Hopefully just enough information for the player to start building their own story of what happened here. The paths connecting each of the nodes features something for the player to find, most of which are silver mining nodes, providing the player with ore. The first node they cross also provides a pickaxe in case they did not have one with them. Some of the paths also contain traps, like this environmental hazard of rocks collapsing in. The second major node provides multiple routes as well, and some more bandits who are resting off to the side. The player can choose to move past these bandits or fight them. There is loot for the player riddled around these bandits, as well as more handcrafted placement of objects to show this is a living space and not just a dungeon in a game. The back of the dungeon is another path filled with mining nodes for the player to grab. These lead into a room that at first seems very plain, with only one enemy and not much else. However, above the player was one of the alternate routes. In one of the previous nodes, the player could follow a path, marked with blood, that leads to an upper part of this room. Here we can see another body with an arrow sticking out of it. Next to him is a journal, with more story about the previous miners and their troubles with the bandits. The final boss room is set up to force the player into an encounter with the boss. It is not impossible, but it is difficult to move around the boss in this room. After defeating the boss, the player can find treasure and a boss chest inside of what can only be assumed as the boss's bedchamber. Next we have our reveal, that we are dumping back into the entrance from the waterfall. If the player did not explore or see the note from the first encounter, they will now have a different approach. If the player still chooses to avoid combat, they still have two paths they can take. And that is the dungeon. Keep in mind the exposition and story provided inside the dungeon is separate from the questline. I want to provide more substance to the world in the form of multiple events occurring. If the player stumbles upon this dungeon but not the quest, they should still be intrigued and entertained. That is all for now, and thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to add me on Twitter at KanashiGD, and take a look at my website KanashiGD.com for more level design and game design.